The Unnamed Grey. There is a particular grey that has no name in any language Hana knows, though she has looked for it. It is not sadness exactly. Sadness has a shape, a weight you can set down when your arms tire. It is not grief, which announces itself, which has a beginning you can point to and say, "Here, this is where it started." It is something quieter and more persistent than either of these. A dimming, like a lamp turned low for so long that you forget it was ever bright, that you stop noticing the room is dark because the darkness has become simply the room. Hana had been living in this gray for, she tried to calculate, standing in front of her mirror on a Thursday evening in November, her coat already on, her keys in her hand. 3 years? 4? It was difficult to say. The gray had arrived gradually, the way the light leaves Toronto in autumn. You don't notice each individual shortening until one day you look up and it is dark at 5 o'clock and you think, when did that happen? She knew when it had happened, of course. She knew exactly. It had happened in the accumulation. The news alerts she had turned off and then turned back on because not knowing was worse. The phone calls with her mother now in Gaziantep. Her mother's voice carefully arranged into a shape that was meant to convey, "I am fine," but conveyed, to a daughter who had been reading that voice for 38 years, something considerably more complicated. The cousin still in Syria, whose messages stopped arriving, then started again, then stopped. The neighborhood in Damascus where she had grown up, which she followed on a news site the way you follow a patient in a hospital, checking the charts, dreading the charts, unable to stop checking. 8 years in Toronto, 8 years of building a life, a good life, genuinely. She was not being falsely modest. While another life, the first one in Syria, the one that had made her, was being unmade on the other side of the world. It is a particular kind of exhaustion, living in 2 places at once. The body is here, the heart is perpetually elsewhere, perpetually tuned to a frequency of dread, and slowly, without meaning to, you begin to contract. To take up less space, to say no to things that would require you to be present, fully present, in this life, in this city, in this moment. Because presence feels like a betrayal of the other place, the suffering place, the people who do not have the option of being elsewhere. Hana had said no to many things in 4 years. She had almost said no tonight. Mira had called on Tuesday. Potluck, Thursday, my place, 7 o'clock. I'm making fata and I don't want to hear any excuses. Hana had looked at her phone and composed mentally an excuse that was technically true. She was tired. She had an early meeting. She hadn't been sleeping well. All of these things were accurate. All of these things were also, she recognized dimly, the same excuse she had been making in various configurations for the better part of 2 years. She had called back and said she would come. She was not sure, standing now at the mirror with her coat on, why she had done that. The woman in the mirror looked back at her with an expression that was not unhappy, precisely, but that had a quality of absence, as though the person who used to inhabit that face had stepped out briefly and not yet returned. Hana had photographs of herself from 10 years ago, 12, 15. A woman who looked at the camera as though she was about to say something, who took up her full amount of space in every frame, who had in her expression something that could only be called heat. She did not look like that now. She picked up her dish, a bowl of muhammara she had made that afternoon. The red pepper and walnut paste her grandmother had taught her, the recipe she still measured in handfuls because her grandmother had never owned a measuring cup. And she went out into the November cold. Mira's apartment was on the 3rd floor of a building near Bloor and Bathurst, and it smelled, when Hana arrived, of cardamom and hot bread and the particular warm density of a small space that already held several people who were glad to see each other. There were 6 of them tonight. Mira, who had come from Aleppo 14 years ago and ran a translation service from her kitchen table, and laughed at a volume that occasionally prompted notes from the neighbors. Sana, who was a nurse and had been in Toronto for 20 years, and had somehow in that time become the person they all called when anything went wrong. Rima, who had arrived 3 years ago, most recently of all of them, and still had a quality of careful attention to everything, as though she was memorizing the world against the possibility of having to leave it again. And 2 others, women Hana knew less well but recognized, friends of Mira's, one Lebanese, one Iraqi, the specific international of the Diaspora, the community that forms not from geography, but from a shared understanding of what it means to be from a place that the news keeps happening to. They ate. The table was covered. Mira's fata in the center, Hana's muhammara, Sana's kibbe, flatbreads and olives and a salad. Rima had made with pomegranate seeds that caught the light like small jewels. They ate and talked, and Hana found herself doing the things she always did in social situations now, performing the version of herself that was fine, that was present, that asked questions and laughed at the right moments and gave no indication that half of her was, as always, somewhere else entirely. She was good at this. She had been practicing for years. It was after the food, when they had pushed back from the table and someone had made tea, and the conversation had loosened into the comfortable wandering of people who have been talking for hours. It was then that Mira picked up her phone and said, "Wait, I want to play something," with the particular excitement of a person who has been holding a thing in reserve. The song began. It was Fairuz. Of course it was Fairuz. It is always Fairuz at the end of the evening when the food is finished and the tea is in your hands and the guards are down. The specific song was Nasam Alain al-Hawa. The breeze breathed upon us, and Hana knew it the way she knew her own heartbeat, had known it since before she could have explained what knowing was, had heard it on her mother's radio on mornings when the light came through the kitchen window in Damascus, and the world was simply whole. The room changed, not dramatically. No one wept, no one leaped to their feet. But something shifted in the quality of the air, a collective and unspoken recognition passing between them like a current. Rima closed her eyes. Sana set down her tea and looked at her hands. Mira, who had put on the song, was already somewhere else. Her expression, the specific expression of a person traveling inside themselves to a place that exists now only in memory and music. Hana felt something move in her chest. It was not the gray. The gray was a numbness, an absence. This was the opposite of numbness. This was sensation, specific and sharp, like the return of feeling to a limb that has been asleep. Not comfortable, not painless, but real. The realness of it was startling. She thought of her grandmother's kitchen, the smell of it, cumin and rose water and the specific cool of stone floors on bare feet in summer. She thought of a particular afternoon when she was 9 years old, sitting under the kitchen table while the women of her family talked above her, their voices weaving together in a sound she had not understood then. Was the sound of a world, a complete and ordinary world that would not last. She thought of Damascus in the late afternoon, the light going gold over the old city, the sound of the call to prayer moving through the air like something living. She thought of all of this and felt it, not with the distant ache of the last 4 years, the gray behind glass, the news on a screen, but immediately with the full weight of it, the way you feel something when you are actually present in your own body. Her eyes were wet. She did not wipe them. This is the thing about joy, which is often misunderstood. It is not the absence of sorrow. It does not require the sorrow to be resolved, or the news to be good, or the world to be other than it is. It can exist. It insists on existing, alongside the grief, not instead of it. The lamp does not undo the dark, but it is a lamp. Hana had been so afraid of betraying the darkness, so committed to her vigil, her solidarity with the suffering she could not stop, that she had made herself into a kind of monument to it, as though joy were abandonment, as though being fully alive here were a crime against those who were not. But the women in the room with her were alive, were present, were feeling right now the same thing she was feeling, the same love for the same lost world, and they were not less for it. They were not betraying anyone. They were keeping something alive. This is called tending the flame. You cannot tend it from inside the gray. Mira was watching her. Hana became aware of this and looked up, expecting, she wasn't sure what, concern perhaps. The careful expression people wore when they had noticed she was not quite all right. But Mira was smiling, not carefully, not with concern, with simple, uncomplicated recognition, the expression of a woman who had been waiting without pressure for her friend to come back. "There you are," the expression said. Hana laughed. It came out of her suddenly, without warning. A real laugh, not the performed one, not the social laugh she had been producing on cue for years. Something that started in her chest and moved outward, that took up space in the room, that was involuntary and therefore true. Rima opened her eyes. Sana looked up. "What?" said Hana, still laughing, looking around at them. "Nothing," said Mira, "just you. You're back." "I was here," Hana protested. "You were here," Mira agreed pleasantly, in the tone of someone conceding a minor point while winning a larger one. Sana refilled her tea without being asked. Rima passed the last of the Muhammara. The song finished and another began. Something older, something Hana's grandmother would have known. And they sat in the warm room in the cold city and were, for this hour, entirely present. She walked home. It was not a short walk, but she wanted it. Wanted the cold air and the lit streets, and the time to carry what she was carrying before she set it down for the night. The news was still there. It would be there tomorrow. Her phone would light up with alerts, and her mother's voice would have its careful arrangement, and the cousin whose messages sometimes stopped would sometimes stop. None of this had changed. But something else had changed, small and significant, the way small, significant things always change, quietly, without announcement, in the moment you weren't bracing for it. She thought of the wheel and her grandmother's words, ad-dahr, the turning of fortune. Al-ayyam dual. The days are revolving states. We do not hold the wheel. The wheel holds us, turns us, and sets us down somewhere we did not expect. She had been set down in Toronto. She had been set down tonight in Mira's apartment at the turn of a song. She had been set down back inside herself. The city was lit around her. The specific lit quality of Toronto in November, the shop windows and the streetcars and the cold, bright sky above the buildings that never got fully dark. She walked through it and felt it, the solidity of the pavement and the cold on her face, and the Muhammarat bowl in her bag, and the warmth still in her chest from the room she had left. She was here. She was still and also there, with her mother, with the city she had come from, with all of it, always. But she was here. This was not a resolution. She was not going to sleep tonight without checking her phone. She was not going to wake tomorrow cured of the vigil, free of the frequency. She knew this. But the lamp was lit. Dimly, tentatively, the way a flame behaves when it has been banked a long time and is just remembering its own nature. You do not need a great blaze. You need enough light to see what's in the room. The room, she thought, walking home through the lit city, had quite a lot in it. She texted Mira when she got back. "Thank you for tonight. I almost didn't come." The reply was immediate because Mira was always awake at this hour. "I know, that's why I called." Then, after a moment, "Same time next month. You're making the Muhammarat again. It was better than mine, and I need you to know I will never admit that to your face." Hana sat on the edge of her bed, still in her coat, and smiled at her phone. Outside, the city made its city sounds. The distant streetcar, someone's music, the ordinary evidence of 10,000 lives being lived nearby, in the cold, in the light. She took off her coat. She did not check the news. Not tonight. Tonight she was here, only here, and the flame was lit. And that was enough, and she let it be enough, and she slept.